No one wanted them. 3 starving dogs, shaking inside a cage while people stood around laughing like it was nothing. It should have ended there. It always does. But then a little girl stepped forward with just 3 coins in her hand, and everything changed. What happened next wasn't normal. Those same broken, unwanted dogs would go on to save lives, stop disasters, and lead her to something no one could explain. But the most chilling part wasn't what they did, it was what they remembered. Because some bonds don't fade even after being lost. The real question is, why did she feel like she had no choice but to save them? Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The air was dry, and a thin layer of dust moved slowly across the ground as people gathered around a small wooden platform. 3 dogs stood inside a rusted cage, weak and quiet, their ribs visible through their skin. They were not barking. They were not fighting. They were just standing there, as if they had already given up. Around them, people talked casually, some laughing, some pointing, treating the moment like entertainment instead of something serious. A man near the front made a joke, and a few others laughed louder than necessary. No one stepped forward. No one asked a question. It was just another auction to them. Then a small figure stopped at the edge of the crowd. Emma had only come to buy bread, nothing more, but the moment she saw the cage, she did not move again. Something inside her tightened without warning. She stared at the dogs, and for a second, the noise around her faded. A memory pushed its way in, sharp and unwanted. A few months earlier, she had sat on the floor of her home, holding her own dog, Rusty, as his breathing slowed. There had been no food left in the house that day. No help. No one to call. She had watched him die in her arms, not because he was sick, but because there was nothing to give him. The same helpless feeling returned now, stronger than before. Emma blinked, and the present came back all at once. The crowd was still there. The auction was ending. The man at the front was about to close the sale. Emma stepped forward before she could think herself out of it. Her hands were shaking, but she opened her fist anyway. 3 small coins rested in her palm. It was not enough. Everyone knew it. "I'll take them," she said, her voice quiet but clear enough to be heard. For a moment, no one reacted. Then a few people started laughing. Someone said it was a joke. Another man shook his head and turned away. Emma did not move. She kept her hand open even when it felt pointless. Inside the cage, one of the dogs slowly lifted its head. It looked at her, not with energy, but with something that had not completely disappeared. Then, very slightly, its tail moved. It was not strong. It was not fast, but it was enough to be noticed. The laughter began to fade. One person stopped smiling. Another looked back at the cage more carefully. The moment changed in a way no one could explain. The same crowd that had been watching for entertainment now stood in silence for a few seconds longer than expected. Then someone reached into their pocket. A coin dropped into Emma's hand. Then another. No one announced it. No one made a speech. But slowly, the total began to grow. Emma walked home with the 3 dogs close behind her, their steps slow but steady, as if they were not sure this new direction was real. The street that had felt normal earlier now felt heavier, not because anything had changed physically, but because people were watching her differently. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. A group of boys laughed openly, and one of them tossed a small stone toward the dogs, not hard enough to injure, but enough to show what they thought. Emma did not react. She kept walking, one hand slightly extended behind her as if guiding the dogs forward without pulling them. By the time she reached her house, the tension was already waiting for her inside. Her father looked up the moment she stepped in, his expression tightening as soon as he saw the animals. "What is this?" he asked, not loudly, but with enough weight to stop her where she stood. Emma tried to explain, but the words came out uneven. She showed him the coins, told him about the auction, about how no one else stepped forward. Her father listened, but his face did not soften. "We can barely feed ourselves," he said, his voice lower now, more tired than angry. "And you bring 3 more mouths into this house." The room felt smaller. Emma had no answer that could fix the truth of what he was saying. She only looked at the dogs, then back at him. "I couldn't leave them," she said quietly. The words did not solve anything, but they did not need to. They were the only truth she had. The next few days were not easy. Food was stretched thinner. Neighbors continued to talk. The same boys passed by again, sometimes shouting, sometimes throwing small things toward the yard, But something else started to change, slowly and without announcement. The dogs stayed close to the house, always alert, always watching. They did not wander far. They did not cause trouble, they simply stayed. A few days later, around 20:30 p.m., a different kind of noise spread through the town. Smoke rose from the direction of the old warehouse near the edge of the street. At first, it looked small, like something that could be handled easily. But within minutes, the fire grew faster than expected. The wind picked up, pushing flames along the dry wood and into nearby structures. People started shouting. Some ran toward the scene, others backed away. The situation turned chaotic quickly. Inside the warehouse, several workers had been trapped, cut off by falling debris and thick smoke. It was hard to see, hard to breathe. No one knew how many were still inside. Before anyone could organize a proper response, the 3 dogs were already moving. One ran ahead, barking sharply as it reached the edge of the crowd, drawing attention in a way that forced people to turn. Another circled toward the side entrance, stopping near a blocked doorway and barking repeatedly as if marking a location. The third disappeared briefly and then reappeared further down the road, running straight toward a patrol officer and refusing to leave until he followed. The movement was not random, it was direct, focused, the kind of behavior that made people stop questioning and start reacting. Within minutes, attention shifted. The officer reached the warehouse, others followed. The barking guided them to the right points, the right entrances, the places where people were still alive but losing time. One by one, workers were pulled out, coughing, disoriented but alive. The fire was eventually brought under control before it could spread further into the town. When the smoke began to clear, the scene looked different from what it could have been. People stood outside, shaken, some sitting on the ground, others holding on to each other in silence. It did not take long for the realization to settle in. Without those dogs, the response would have been slower. Confused. Too late for some. The same animals that had been laughed at days earlier were now standing near Emma's house again, quiet, watchful, as if nothing unusual had happened. But the town had seen enough, and this time no one was laughing. By 40:00 p.m. that same day, the town square had started to fill again, but this time the mood was different. People were not gathered for entertainment. They were talking about what had just happened, replaying moments from the fire, pointing toward the warehouse, and mentioning the dogs in a tone that carried something new. Respect had begun to replace doubt, even if no one said it directly. Emma stood near the edge of the square with the 3 dogs beside her, unsure of what to do with the attention. She was not used to people looking at her this way. For a brief moment, it almost felt calm. Then one of the dogs shifted slightly, its legs unsteady. Emma noticed it immediately. The dog tried to take another step, then suddenly collapsed onto the ground without warning. The sound was small, but it cut through everything around her. Emma's breath caught in her chest. She dropped to her knees beside the dog, her hands moving quickly but without direction, as if she was trying to fix something she could not understand. The world around her faded again, just like it had at the auction. Another memory forced its way forward, stronger this time. Years earlier she had stood in a quiet room, watching her mother grow weaker day by day until there was nothing left to do. After that, it had been Rusty. The same helpless moment repeating itself in a different form. Loss had not been a single event in her life. It had been a pattern. And now it was happening again. No, she said under her breath, shaking her head as if that could stop it. The dog's breathing was uneven, shallow, like it was struggling to hold on. People around her began to notice. A few stepped closer. Someone suggested calling a doctor. Emma looked up immediately, hope and fear mixing in her expression. The local doctor arrived quickly, but his face changed as soon as he examined the dog. "It needs treatment," he said, careful with his words, "but it won't be simple." Emma understood what that meant before he said anything else. "How much?" she asked. The doctor hesitated for a second, then gave a number that felt too large the moment it was spoken. Emma's hands tightened. She did not even need to check. She did not have it. She looked toward her father, who had followed at a distance. He did not avoid her eyes, but he lowered his head slightly, the answer already clear. "We can't," he said quietly. The words were not harsh, they were honest, and that made them heavier. For a second it felt like everything was closing in again. The same helplessness. The same ending she had seen before, but something unexpected happened. A man from the crowd stepped forward, the same man who had laughed at the auction. He did not speak at first. He simply placed a few coins near Emma's hand. Then another person followed. Then another. No one made a scene. No one tried to take credit. The same people who had once stood back were now stepping closer, one by one, offering what they could. The shift was quiet, but it was real. Emma looked at the small pile growing in front of her, then back at the dog. Time was still moving. The condition was still critical. She knew it might not be enough. Without saying anything, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, something she had kept close for a long time. Rusty's collar. She held it for a second, her fingers tightening around it, then stood and handed it to a nearby vendor who understood immediately what she was asking. There was no negotiation. No hesitation. The exchange was quick. The money was enough. The treatment began without delay. Minutes felt longer than they should have. Emma stayed close, not stepping away even once, her eyes fixed on every movement, every small sign. The dog did not respond at first. Then, slowly, its breathing steadied. Its body relaxed slightly. The tension in the air shifted again, but this time toward relief. When the doctor finally stepped back, he looked at Emma differently. "It will live," he said. The words were simple, but they carried everything she needed to hear. Emma did not speak. She just lowered her head for a second, letting the moment settle. Around her, the same people who had once laughed were now standing in silence, watching without judgment. The doctor paused, then added something else, not to the crowd, but to her. "You didn't just save a dog," he said. "You reminded people how to be human." Emma looked up, her eyes still wet, but steady now. For the first time in a long while, the pattern had changed. This time something had been saved. The next day at 1:05 a.m., Pine Road School Street looked like any other normal morning. Children were arriving in small groups, some laughing, some dragging their feet, while teachers stood near the entrance guiding them inside. The air was calm, and nothing about the scene suggested danger. Emma walked along the same street with the 3 dogs beside her, their pace steady, their attention moving between the surroundings in a way that had become familiar. Not long ago, this was the same road where she used to walk alone, hearing whispers behind her back, feeling eyes follow her for the wrong reasons. But now, things were different. People noticed her, but they did not laugh. They watched quietly, some even nodding as she passed. The change was subtle, but it was there. As she approached the school gate, one of the dogs suddenly stopped. Its body stiffened, and without warning, it began barking sharply, louder than usual, the kind of sound that did not match the calm environment. A few children turned in surprise. A teacher near the gate frowned and waved a hand dismissively. "Take them away from here," she said, clearly irritated. Emma hesitated. The dog was not acting randomly. She had seen this before. The other 2 dogs shifted as well, their attention locking onto the same direction. Something was wrong. Emma looked around, trying to understand what they were reacting to. At first, nothing stood out. Then she noticed it, a faint smell in the air, barely noticeable, something sharp and out of place. Gas. It was light, easy to ignore, especially in an open space. But once she recognized it, she could not unnotice it. "There's something wrong," Emma said, stepping closer to the entrance. The teacher shook her head. "It's nothing. Don't cause panic," she replied quickly, already turning back to the children. Authority dismissed it. The moment could have ended there. But the dog did not stop. It broke away from Emma and ran toward the side of the building, barking continuously now, its urgency increasing with every second. Emma followed without thinking. The path led toward a narrow area near the back of the school, close to the basement access. The smell grew stronger the closer she got. The dog reached a metal door and began scratching at it, barking louder, more aggressively, as if trying to force attention where it was needed. Emma moved closer and pulled the handle. The door opened slightly, and the smell hit harder this time, no longer faint. It was clear now. Gas was leaking inside. The realization came all at once. If someone turned on a light, if a spark happened, if anything triggered it, the entire building could explode. Emma turned immediately and ran back toward the main entrance. "Stop! Everyone get out!" she shouted, her voice louder than anyone had ever heard it before. At first, people froze, unsure whether to react. Then the dog's barking continued, sharp and constant, cutting through hesitation. Emma reached the alarm and pulled it down with force. The loud ringing filled the building instantly, replacing confusion with urgency. Teachers began moving students out, faster now, guided by instinct more than instruction. The second dog positioned itself near the exit, barking and guiding children in the right direction, while the third stayed near the basement door, refusing to leave its spot, as if holding the line until everyone was safe. The evacuation moved quickly, not perfectly but fast enough. Children poured out into the open, some scared, some confused, but moving away from danger. Within minutes, the building was cleared. Emma stood outside, breathing hard, watching as the last group exited. Only then did the barking slow. Authorities arrived shortly after, and once they checked the source, the confirmation came quickly. The leak was real. The concentration was high. It would not have taken much to trigger it. One official looked at the scene, then at Emma, then back at the building. "A few more minutes," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else, "and this would have been a disaster." The words settled heavily in the air. This was not a small incident. This was something that could have changed everything. Emma did not respond. She simply looked at the dogs, who now stood calm again, as if their work was done. Around her, people were no longer unsure. The doubt was gone. What remained was something stronger, something that did not need to be spoken out loud. The next day at 1:05 a.m., Pine Road School Street looked like any other normal morning. Children were arriving in small groups, some laughing, some dragging their feet, while teachers stood near the entrance guiding them inside. The air was calm, and nothing about the scene suggested danger. Emma walked along the same street with the 3 dogs beside her, their pace steady, their attention moving between the surroundings in a way that had become familiar. Not long ago, this was the same road where she used to walk alone, hearing whispers behind her back, feeling eyes follow her for the wrong reasons. But now, things were different. People noticed her, but they did not laugh. They watched quietly, some even nodding as she passed. The change was subtle, but it was there. As she approached the school gate, one of the dogs suddenly stopped. Its body stiffened, and without warning, it began barking sharply, louder than usual, the kind of sound that did not match the calm environment. A few children turned in surprise. A teacher near the gate frowned and waved a hand dismissively. "Take them away from here," she said, clearly irritated. Emma hesitated. The dog was not acting randomly. She had seen this before. The other 2 dogs shifted as well, their attention locking onto the same direction. Something was wrong. Emma looked around, trying to understand what they were reacting to. At first, nothing stood out. Then she noticed it, a faint smell in the air, barely noticeable, something sharp and out of place. Gas. It was light, easy to ignore, especially in an open space. But once she recognized it, she could not unnotice it. "There's something wrong," Emma said, stepping closer to the entrance. The teacher shook her head. "It's nothing. Don't cause panic," she replied quickly, already turning back to the children. Authority dismissed it. The moment could have ended there. But the dog did not stop. It broke away from Emma and ran toward the side of the building, barking continuously now, its urgency increasing with every second. Emma followed without thinking. The path led toward a narrow area near the back of the school, close to the basement access. The smell grew stronger the closer she got. The dog reached a metal door and began scratching at it, barking louder, more aggressively, as if trying to force attention where it was needed. Emma moved closer and pulled the handle. The door opened slightly, and the smell hit harder this time, no longer faint. It was clear now. Gas was leaking inside. The realization came all at once. If someone turned on a light, if a spark happened, if anything triggered it, the entire building could explode. Emma turned immediately and ran back toward the main entrance. "Stop! Everyone get out!" she shouted, her voice louder than anyone had ever heard it before. At first, people froze, unsure whether to react. Then the dog's barking continued, sharp and constant, cutting through hesitation. Emma reached the alarm and pulled it down with force. The loud ringing filled the building instantly, replacing confusion with urgency. Teachers began moving students out, faster now, guided by instinct more than instruction. The second dog positioned itself near the exit, barking and guiding children in the right direction, while the third stayed near the basement door, refusing to leave its spot, as if holding the line until everyone was safe. The evacuation moved quickly, not perfectly but fast enough. Children poured out into the open, some scared, some confused, but moving away from danger. Within minutes, the building was cleared. Emma stood outside, breathing hard, watching as the last group exited. Only then did the barking slow. Authorities arrived shortly after, and once they checked the source, the confirmation came quickly. The leak was real. The concentration was high. It would not have taken much to trigger it. One official looked at the scene, then at Emma, then back at the building. A few more minutes, he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else, and this would have been a disaster. The words settled heavily in the air. This was not a small incident. This was something that could have changed everything. Emma did not respond. She simply looked at the dogs, who now stood calm again, as if their work was done. Around her, people were no longer unsure. The doubt was gone. What remained was something stronger, something that did not need to be spoken out loud. The road was quiet, lined with aging houses that looked like they had been forgotten slowly over time. Emma walked at her usual pace, the 3 dogs moving beside her in a calm and steady rhythm, until one of them suddenly stopped. It did not hesitate or look around. It just stopped completely, its body still, its eyes fixed on a single point ahead. Emma took a few steps forward before realizing the dog was no longer beside her. She turned back and saw it staring at an old, broken house at the end of the street. The windows were dark, the paint peeling, the door slightly uneven as if it had not been closed properly in years. The dog did not bark. It did not move. It just kept looking, as if something inside that house was not new to it. Emma felt a slight unease, not from fear, but from the way the dog was behaving. She had seen urgency before. This was different. This looked like recognition. The other 2 dogs shifted slightly but did not react the same way. This moment belonged to one. Emma walked back toward it slowly. "What is it?" she asked quietly, though she knew she would not get an answer. The dog finally moved, not quickly but with purpose, walking straight toward the house. Emma followed without stopping it. The closer they got, the more the silence around the place felt heavier. The door was half open, just enough to show darkness inside. The air carried a faint smell, something stale, something that had been closed off for too long. The dog stepped inside first. Emma hesitated for a second, then followed. The light from outside barely reached beyond the entrance. Inside everything was still. No movement, no sound. Just the quiet weight of an empty space that did not feel completely empty. The dog continued forward, its steps careful, its focus fixed deeper inside the house. Emma's heartbeat picked up slightly, not from panic, but from the uncertainty of what she might find. Then she heard it. A faint sound, barely there, like someone trying to speak without strength. Emma froze for a second, then moved toward it. The dog reached a corner of the room and stopped. On the floor, near the wall, an old woman lay motionless, her body weak, her face pale, her breathing shallow. She had not moved in what looked like days. Emma dropped to her knees immediately. "Can you hear me?" she asked, her voice urgent now. The woman's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then settling weakly on the dog. Her lips moved with effort. "You came back?" she whispered. Emma looked at the dog, then back at her, trying to understand. The pieces did not connect at first. Then they did. The way the dog had stopped, the way it had stared at the house. This was not a random place. This was memory. The woman's hand moved slightly, reaching toward the dog. "I thought you were gone," she said, her voice breaking with exhaustion. Emma felt the realization settle deeper. This dog had been here before. It had belonged to her. It had not forgotten. The woman's breathing struggled again, and Emma quickly looked around, searching for anything useful. There was nothing. No food. No water within reach. She had been alone for too long. "I'm going to get help," Emma said quickly, already standing up. But the dog did not move away from the woman. It stayed beside her, lowering itself slightly, as if refusing to leave her side again. Emma ran out of the house and called for assistance, her voice carrying down the empty street until someone responded. Help arrived faster than expected, drawn by urgency rather than doubt. Water was brought. Food was given carefully. The woman was lifted and supported, her condition fragile but no longer ignored. Through it all, the dog did not leave her. It stayed close, watching, waiting as if making sure this time would not end the same way. As things settled, the woman spoke again, more clearly now, though still weak. "I didn't leave him," she said, her eyes filling with quiet tears. "I had no choice." Emma did not question it. She did not need to. Some situations did not require explanation to be understood. She looked at the dog, then at the woman, and saw something that went beyond rescue. This was not just about saving someone in need. This was something that had started long before today, and had found its way back to finish itself. The dog had remembered what others would have forgotten, and it had come back. The street was calm again, the kind of normal that should have felt like relief after everything that had happened. But something about Emma felt different. She was standing near the side of her house, the 3 dogs resting close by, when her expression suddenly changed. There was no warning, no clear trigger. One moment she was quiet, and the next, her eyes filled and she turned away from everyone, trying to hide it but not fast enough. A few people nearby noticed, but no one stepped forward immediately. Emma walked a few steps further, then stopped, her shoulders tightening as she tried to hold everything in. It didn't work. The tears came anyway, not loud, not dramatic, just steady and impossible to stop. For a long time she had been moving from one moment to the next without pausing, rescue after rescue, problem after problem. And now, with no immediate crisis in front of her, everything she had been holding back started to surface at once. Her past did not come back in pieces. It came all together. Her mother's absence, Rusty's death, the feeling of losing things she could not protect no matter how much she tried. It had never fully left her. It had just been pushed aside. Now it was right in front of her again. People had started calling her strong. Some even called her a hero. But no one had asked how she felt carrying all of it. No one had stopped long enough to see that strength did not remove weight. It only hid it better. Emma sat down slowly near the edge of the yard, her hands resting in her lap, her breathing uneven. "I'm tired," she said quietly, not to anyone in particular, but the words were clear enough to be heard. Saying it out loud changed something. It made the feeling real in a way she could not ignore anymore. For a moment, she looked at the dogs, then away again. A thought crossed her mind, simple but heavy. Maybe she could stop. Maybe she did not have to keep doing this. Maybe it was okay to step back and let someone else handle things. The idea stayed longer than she expected. For the first time, quitting did not feel impossible. It felt close. The kind of close that only comes when someone has reached a limit they didn't know they had. She lowered her head slightly, her decision not spoken yet, but forming. The silence around her stretched for a few seconds. Then something shifted beside her. One of the dogs moved closer and sat down next to her without making a sound. Another followed, positioning itself on her other side. The third stepped forward and gently placed its head against her hand. There was no urgency in their movement. No demand. Just presence. Emma did not react immediately. Then she looked down. The contact was simple but it grounded her. The same way she had stayed with them when they were weak, they were now staying with her without question. She took a slow breath. Then another. The weight did not disappear, but it changed. It felt shared instead of carried alone. Emma lifted her hand slightly and rested it on the dog's head, her fingers moving slowly as if reminding herself that something was still steady. The thought of quitting did not vanish completely, but it lost its hold. She realized something she had not allowed herself to see clearly before. She was not the only one giving support. She was receiving it too, just in a different form. She wiped her face with the back of her hand and sat there for a moment longer until her breathing steadied again. When she finally stood up, nothing dramatic changed on the outside. The street was still the same, the people were still there, but inside, something had reset. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. She was still tired. That part was real. But she was not alone in it, and that made the next step possible. 12:15 p.m., August 1898. The knock on Emma's door was not loud, but it carried urgency. She opened it and paused for a second when she saw who was standing there. It was the same man who had laughed the loudest on the day of the auction. The one who had made sure others heard his voice when he mocked her decision. He did not look the same now. His face was tense, his eyes red, and whatever confidence he once had was gone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then his voice broke before he could control it. "My son is missing," he said. The words were simple, but they carried enough weight to explain everything else. Emma did not remind him of the past. She did not mention the way he had treated her. She only listened. He continued faster now, as if time itself was pushing him. The boy had not returned home. He had been gone for hours, then longer, then a full night. The police had been called. They had searched nearby areas, asked questions, followed small leads that did not last. Nothing had worked. The man's hands were unsteady now. "They can't find him," he said. "No one can." The fear in his voice was not hidden anymore. Emma stepped aside and let him in without hesitation. The three dogs were already alert, watching him, sensing the shift in the situation. Emma asked a few quick questions, enough to understand the last place the boy had been seen. The answers were incomplete, but they were enough to start. The police had covered the main areas. That meant whatever had been missed would not be obvious. Emma stepped outside, and the dogs followed immediately. There was no delay, No discussion about whether to act. The moment was already moving. The dogs began scanning the ground, their movements focused, not random, as if picking up on something that could not be explained easily. Then one of them turned sharply toward the direction leading out of the main street and into a more isolated path near the edge of town. The others followed without hesitation. Emma moved with them, her pace quick but controlled. The man followed behind, struggling to keep up, calling his son's name as they moved further away from familiar ground. The path narrowed, leading toward an area where fewer people passed. The environment changed slowly. Less noise, less movement. The kind of place where something could go unnoticed for too long. The dogs did not slow down. They moved deeper, then suddenly stopped near a small drop in the ground hidden by overgrown grass and loose dirt. One of the dogs barked sharply, then again, louder this time, marking the spot clearly. Emma moved closer and looked down. At first, she saw nothing. Then she heard it, a weak sound, almost lost under the wind, a child's voice. "Help!" The man froze for a second, then rushed forward. Emma held him back just enough to keep him from slipping as they both moved carefully down the uneven edge. The boy was there, trapped in a shallow pit, his leg caught under a fallen piece of wood, his face pale but conscious. Relief hit the man all at once, but Emma stayed focused. "Don't move too fast," she said, guiding him. Together, they lifted the weight carefully and freed the boy without causing further harm. The moment the pressure released, the boy cried out, not from pain alone, but from the fear that had been building for too long. His father pulled him close immediately, holding him with a grip that made it clear he was not letting go again. For a few seconds, nothing else mattered. Then the man looked up at Emma, his expression completely different from the last time they had faced each other. There was no pride left, no judgment, only regret. He stepped back slightly, his voice quieter now. "I was wrong," he said. The words were not long, but they were enough. Emma did not respond with anything dramatic. She simply nodded once, accepting the moment without holding on to the past. Around them, the dogs had already stepped back, their work done, watching calmly as the situation settled. The man looked at them, then back at Emma, understanding something he had not seen before. Respect did not come from words. It came from actions repeated until they could not be ignored. And now, he had seen enough to understand. The morning started quietly, but the message did not feel ordinary. A man arrived with formal papers, asking for Emma by name, something that had never happened before. She stepped outside, slightly confused, while her father stood behind her, watching closely. The man explained everything clearly. There was an opportunity in the city. Training, resources, proper support, and more money than Emma had ever seen. People had heard about what she had done. They believed her work could grow into something bigger, something structured, something recognized beyond their small town. The offer was real, it was written. It had weight. Emma held the paper in her hands, reading the lines slowly, making sure she understood every part. It was not just help, it was a different life. Behind her, her father remained silent at first, then finally spoke in a tone she did not expect. "You should go," he said. Emma turned to look at him, surprised by how quickly he had reached that conclusion. He stepped closer, his expression steady but thoughtful. "This could change everything for you," he added. He did not mention the struggles directly, but they were always present. The lack of money, the limits of what they could do, the constant need to choose between what was right and what was possible. This offer removed those limits. It gave her a way out. Emma looked back at the paper. It was tempting, not in a shallow way, but in a practical one. With those resources she could help more animals, maybe even prevent the kind of situations she had faced before. It made sense. That was what made it difficult. The day moved forward, but her focus did not. Every small moment returned to the same question: stay or leave. By night, she still had not given an answer. She sat outside her house, the paper folded in her hands, the 3 dogs resting nearby, unaware of the decision that was forming around them. The town was quiet again, the kind of quiet that left too much room for thinking. She looked at the street, the same place where everything had started. The auction, the fire, the school, the people, the changes. None of it would have happened somewhere else. It had happened here. Her father stepped outside and sat beside her without saying anything at first. After a few seconds he spoke again, softer this time. "You don't have to stay for me," he said. Emma knew that. That was not what was holding her back. The conflict was not about obligation. It was about belonging. She looked at the dogs, then back at the paper. If she left, she would gain something bigger. But she would lose something immediate. Something real. Something already in motion. That night, she did not sleep. The decision stayed with her through every hour, turning over in her mind again and again, each side making sense in its own way. By morning, the answer had settled, not because one option disappeared, but because one felt more right than the other. When the man returned for her response, Emma stepped forward with the paper in her hand. She did not hesitate this time. "I'm staying," she said. The man looked surprised, as if he had expected a different outcome. "Are you sure?" he asked. Emma nodded once. Yes. She did not explain it in detail. She did not need to. The decision was already clear to her. It was not about rejecting opportunity. It was about choosing where she was needed most right now. The man accepted the answer and left without argument. The moment passed quietly. No celebration. No regret shone on the surface. Emma stood there for a second longer, then turned back toward her home. The dogs followed without question. Behind her, her father watched with an expression that carried something new. Not concern. Not doubt. Something closer to understanding. The path ahead was not easier. It did not come with guarantees. But it was hers. And for the first time, the choice felt complete. Some years later, around 1100 a.m., the street looked different from how it once had, but not in a way that erased the past. The buildings were more stable, the roads more maintained, and the town carried a sense of quiet order that had grown over time. At the corner where everything had once started, a new sign had been placed. It was simple, clearly written, and easy to read from a distance. Emma and Three Heroes Street. People passed by it daily, some without stopping, others slowing down for a moment as if acknowledging something they had heard before. The story had moved beyond the town. Travelers mentioned it. Visitors came to see the place where it all happened. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Over the years, the events had been told and retold, sometimes exactly, sometimes with small changes, but the core had remained the same. A girl who did not walk away. 3 dogs no one wanted. Moments where small decisions changed larger outcomes. It had become part of the town's identity without anyone formally deciding it should be. On that same day, near the sign, a small group had gathered, not for an event, but simply because people often paused there now. Among them was a young boy, no older than Emma had been when her story began. He stood slightly apart, looking at something near the edge of the road. A stray dog, thin and cautious, watched from a distance, unsure whether to come closer or run. The boy took a step forward. Immediately, a voice from behind him called out, telling him not to go near it. Another person added that it could be dangerous. The warnings were not harsh, but they were familiar. The same kind of hesitation that had once existed years earlier. The boy paused, listening, then looked back at the dog again. For a second, it seemed like he might step away. Then he shook his head slightly, not in defiance, but in quiet decision. "She didn't leave them," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. The words were simple, but they carried recognition. He moved closer, slowly, carefully, lowering himself just enough to show he was not a threat. The dog did not move at first. Then, cautiously, it stepped forward. The distance between them closed in small, careful increments until the moment settled. A connection formed where there had been hesitation before. A few people nearby stopped speaking. They watched instead. Not with doubt, but with something closer to understanding. A short distance away, Emma stood without drawing attention to herself. Time had changed her in quiet ways, but not in ways that removed who she had always been. She did not step in. She did not interrupt. She simply watched the moment unfold, recognizing it without needing to be part of it directly. There was no need to guide it. The choice was being made again, the same way it had been made before, but by someone new. The cycle did not repeat exactly, but it continued in its own way. The boy reached out, and this time, the dog did not step back. It stayed. The people around them did not interfere again. They had learned enough to know when to allow something to happen. Emma remained where she was, her expression calm, not distant, but complete. She did not need to explain anything. The meaning was already clear in what she was seeing. Some actions do not end when the moment passes. They continue, carried forward by others who choose the same path without being told to. Emma turned slightly and walked away, not because the story was over, but because it no longer depended on her to continue. Behind her, the street remained active, the sign still visible, and the moment still unfolding. Nothing dramatic marked the end. There was no final statement, no loud conclusion. Just a quiet understanding that what had started years ago had not disappeared. It had stayed, changed shape, and moved forward through someone else.